Welcome, beautiful souls, to the Soul Collective podcast. I'm your host, Emily Ghosh Harris, and today I am so honored and grateful to welcome Maureen St. Germain to the podcast. Maureen, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure, truly my pleasure. It's always an honor to talk with people like you who are helping to get the word out for spirituality.
Well, I am so excited for this conversation. You are really a guide in so many areas, but one thing that I really want to focus on in this conversation is really connecting with your higher self, cultivating and deepening that connection, mastering the 5D. I know you have your newest book out on this topic, but I want to start by asking you about your journey. I know you grew up one of six in a Catholic household, and so I'm so curious to know how you found your way to doing the work that you're doing in the world.
Okay, well, I was very fortunate because my mother was very plugged in. She had a gift, and so also did my father. And I think all of my siblings had the gift, but I was the one who, gathered it, garnered it, and developed it. So I can tell you as a child, this is kind of a cute story. I always wanted to twirl the baton. And when I was in seventh grade, I borrowed someone's baton that she had brought to school. And it was one of those cheap ones. And the rubber had broken through the metal. The metal had broken through the rubber, I should say. And I threw it up in the air and watched it come down and landed on my orbital socket. And fortunately, I had a nice black eye, but no damage. And my mother never wanted me to take lessons. We were farm people, And so I knew that there were going to be tryouts in May, and when I was a freshman in high school. And this was in January, and they announced, okay, tryouts for major ed are going to be this date in June, May or June. And I thought really hard about this all day long. And I was going to tell my mom that I was going to use my own money that I had in my little savings account. And I was going to arrange to have a teacher, and I was going to figure it out. And I really wanted her to say, yes, it was okay. I came home, she's standing in the kitchen, and I look at her and she says, I've been thinking all day, if you still want to take baton lessons, it would be okay with me.
Wow.
Isn't that cool?
I love that. Early manifestation.
Early manifestation, yeah, before I even knew what I was doing. So my journey was very magical in the sense that I did not have the kind of opposition that so many people encounter. And for that, I'm very, very grateful. My first husband was not as supportive as he could have been, but he was also gifted. And he finally recognized that his opposition was his fear that the stuff he was getting was real, and how can I control that? So it turned out well once he kind of crossed that little bridge. And I always knew that I would be helping others. And I remember as a young mother creating a cassette tape back in the day, saying how much I was helping others, kind of a self-guided, positive talk to myself. And I knew when it occurred because while I'm making the recording, my baby woke up, one of my sons woke up, and I remember getting him up, and while the tape recorder was running, and nursing him. So I had kind of was able to pinpoint when this happened. So it was kind of cool to think about that. So I studied with lots of different modalities, and lots of different resources have also been I'll call it basis. But at the end of the day, the biggest amount of information that I've received has come directly from my higher self and my guides. And It's very interesting because I know I was the first spiritual teacher to say there's no more karma. And people are still reeling when they hear that. They're going, oh my God, how can that be? And the answer, I contemplated this for years when I was first told it, and I finally got the courage to say it. Now, I was told back in 95. So within a year, I told some very good friends who were also students of mine what I had been guided to know. And I had already vetted it for myself, so I knew it was true. And my friends did the same thing. How can this be? And they were devout Buddhists, so it was a big hit for them. And I said at the time, I'm not sure how this can be. I just know it's so. But I now know that it's because we're changing games. We
Mm,
are no longer going to be in a game of polarity. We are no longer in a game of keeping score. That means we're not keeping score on you and we're not keeping score on me. And when we're willing to stop keeping score, then we're out of the game. And Sana Kamara channeled this message through me, and it's so succinct. It basically is straightforward. The game is over. The game, meaning 3D. The game will end when there are no more players.
mm.
Will you be the first to leave or the last?
Do you feel
And
as though everyone is moving into 5D, or will it
that's
be?
right. Yeah, my little joke around that is everybody's going to be 5D whether they're ready or not. We're all going there. And the whole idea that we could wake up and say, I really screwed up yesterday. Thank God there's no more karma.
Mm,
Isn't that amazing?
it is.
It also means you don't carry the wounds of the mistakes you made when you were in your 20s or 30s. And, as a young mother, I know I made mistakes. Um, I'm sure lots of people did, and I certainly have regrets, but I don't, um, those don't hold me back anymore, but they used to.
Yeah.
But
And
that's something very important to tell our audience, look, all you need to do is wake up and say, if you're thinking about the stuff you did that you regret, brush it off and say, thank goodness I don't have karma. And it will
that
get,
resonates with me on a personal level because I feel like we're able to clear things much faster at this time. So I feel that is probably related to just not being in the past, not being in that
right,
polarity.
being in the present,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Something else that I wanted to personally ask you about your journey that I find really inspiring is that you raised four boys, and I know that you were in sort of a corporate position for 8 years before you started really on a prolific path of spiritual teaching. Myself being pregnant right now, it's kind of this feeling of, is everything going to stop? And though I am so excited to become a mother, it's another chapter in my life. And so I would love to hear from your perspective, kind of the phases of evolution that you moved through personally.
Yes, and I was in corporate all my life. So with the exception of when I stayed home with my children for segments of time, like I had three boys 2 years apart, and then a 4 year gap, and I was already back in the workforce, and then that fourth child came. So what I most worried about, and you've nailed it as far as the description, is can I get back in? And if I walk away, can I get back in? And here's the coolest thing. Let's say you're walking along on the sidewalk and your neighbor's on the opposite sidewalk and she's walking. And then you stop and say hello to somebody you see that's also walking but the other way. And then when you're done and you start to walk again, you look up and you and your neighbor are still at parity. So what I learned, and this is for everybody who stops to play mom or parent, depending upon, what your would call it, you don't lose anything, you
Mm,
gain it. And here's another thing that I found out. people will respect you for setting aside your personal desires to support another living being coming into the world.
Mm.
They will never judge you for walking away from your job. And so what happens is when I was interviewing at the next level up, even though I had not put in those years. So that was a really wonderful aha,
Mm.
because that was my biggest concern. I love the corporate world and I loved having a family. And I wanted to have a family, there's no question about that. Um, and I didn't know how they were going to work out. I hadn't really thought about it other than, oh, I wonder what's going to happen when I go back to work. And it turns out it didn't matter. And the other thing I did for myself, this is really interesting, is I was a seamstress before my children were born. And I made all my clothes. I had these beautiful designer clothes. I had studied in New York at Fashion Institute, and I had a knack for sewing. And I had these beautiful, beautiful clothes. And every day I'd get in my closet and start to get dressed. And one day I realized that looking at the beautiful corporate clothes that first of all, I couldn't fit into anymore because I was still recovering from the body differences. And number two, where was I going to wear this stuff? So I gave it all away. I just gave it away. And I thought somebody can get a benefit out of it. And when I'm ready to do something different than the mom thing, I will find the clothes I need or make the clothes I need.
Wow.
Another thing that really helped me, I kept complaining to my husband at the time, I can't seem to lose any weight, I'm stuck. And he said, well, just buy some clothes that fit you nicely. Because I was saying, I can't get into my clothes. And you just buy something that fits you nicely and make it something you really like. And we didn't have a lot of money. And so for him to suggest that was a very generous thing.
Mm.
And I did, and it made all the difference in the world. I suddenly felt good about how I looked.
Yeah.
Isn't that a great piece of advice?
I,
If
I,
you're stuck, just fix it by buying different clothes. And
yeah,
then the other thing I've come to learn is, even if you take 2 years off, the clothes you thought were really cool 2 years ago, you might not think that today,
so
when your
true.
baby's older. So who cares?
Yeah.
Yeah. We get a little attached to the things we buy or the things we make, but we can make more.
It's
So,
really remarkable. I see a through line in your journey, and something that I wanted to ask you about. I love the story of giving away the clothes that you designed, and there's almost this confidence or assurance that you can create and manifest that which you desire. So there's not this attachment to material possessions. And something that really struck me as I was listening to your journey was with your first husband. You shared that there was a time when he went through a bankruptcy and you had a choice. Can you share about that?
um, I'm not sure what we're talking about. So he went through, what was it?
Um, a bankruptcy, and then you
Oh
had,
my goodness. Oh my goodness. I wrote that in the book to help people as they face their own challenges. So first of all, I want to start out by saying there's no law against bankruptcy, and I do not judge bankruptcy. But in my case, I was judging myself because um, I wanted to teach manifestation. And I felt that as a teacher of manifestation, filing bankruptcy would be sending the wrong message. So even though I might have benefited by filing bankruptcy, I chose not to. And so all of our joint debt fell on me. He named me, my former husband named me as his creditor, which meant that everything that we jointly held in terms of credit cards and stuff like that, and it was close to 50K. And back then that was a huge, huge sum of money. And I remember calling him and saying, I had this bankruptcy notice. We're still married. How can you file bankruptcy without me? And I didn't know you could do that. And he said, oh, yes, you can. And he said, if you want to file bankruptcy with me, you can. And I thought, I don't want to file bankruptcy. And so I made a decision that I would pay the debt off. Took me 7 years, but I did it. And back then it was easier for a person to file bankruptcy than it is today. Um,
How did you
so,
not get into scarcity, for anyone listening that maybe is navigating a money
well,
situation?
I did things, like a little bit one at a time. So for example, initially, because the debt load was so big, I was actually going in the hole $100 or $200 a month. After I received the small amount of child support that he was able to give me and my salary and my day job. And as I would end up, my credit card debt was climbing month by month by about $100. Okay. So the first thing that happens when you're in a rough situation is you start thinking, okay, when I get paid, I'm gonna do this. When I get paid, I'm gonna pay the electric bill, I'm gonna pay the phone company, I'm gonna pay whatever. So you start thinking in terms of, oh, I don't have money now, but when I get paid. So what that does is it tells the universe to pile it on, and then when you get paid, it's gone. So what I did is I started to tell myself something different. So when those pink slips came that said you're late, or you have this bill coming in, I would look at it briefly and just say, well, the universe knows something I don't know, because I don't know how I'm gonna pay this. And dismiss my fear in a very logical, sound way. Um, and then the second thing I did is I developed a system, and it's called the Genie system. And the Genie system is how I pulled myself out of debt. And I went into debt twice. First with the end of the marriage, and then the second time when I was moving to New York, I had a huge debt because my house sold for less than the money I had on the loan. You know that drill. It's not a lot of people have been through that. And so um, when a bill would come in when I was in New York, and maybe I signed up for some advertising, and then I didn't have the money to pay it, and I had forgotten about it, they were generous with the billing. I would look at the bill and say out loud, well, the universe knows something I don't know, because I don't know how I'm gonna pay this. And the other thing I did, I was very upfront with my creditors. So for example, there was 1 month, only 1 month in the cycle of time that I was in New York, where I couldn't pay the rent. And I was at a place where I had rented a studio apartment, and I was using it for sessions with people to live in. And also I even held a few classes there. So one day my landlord told me that there was another apartment coming open, and he knew I wanted more space. And I said, well, I'll look at it. He said, Maureen, why don't you keep the studio for your office? You need more space anyway. And then the 1 bedroom apartment can be your private residence. He said, you're doing pretty well, aren't you? And I laughed and I said, well, I am, but I wasn't planning on 2 separate rental fees. And I said, but I'll think about it. And I took his advice and rented the second place. Now I've got these 2 places, but that particular month, several months, maybe a year down the road, I didn't have enough. So I sent a text to my landlord, and I said to him, I'm gonna be late with the rent. Now, that's really hard for people to say.
Mm,
If you tell someone about an obligation, you have an agreement, you tell them ahead of time, I can't make that agreement, there's no big deal, nobody gets upset. But if you don't make that appointment, that date, that obligation, and that time goes by, then you feel the person on the other side feels like they don't really care, they don't understand, they don't honor their commitments.
yes.
So it isn't that we're not allowed to change our mind. What we need to understand is that when we change our mind, no matter for what reason, be in integrity and let the parties involved know ASAP. So because I wrote him, and this is in New York City, so it's, New York City is a pretty interesting place when it comes to these kinds of things. So when I sent him this note, he texted me back and said, when do you think you'll have it? And I said, well, I've got a couple of classes coming up and I expect I'll have it in the next 10 days, but I won't be on time. And he said, well, just pay me when you get it.
Yeah,
Isn't that amazing?
it's amazing. And it really speaks to the power of integrity and communicating openly and honestly, and people appreciate that. I
Mhm.
love that story.
And for those of you who are listening, when you're afraid because they're going to be upset, you're letting them down, it's okay to be afraid. But the gift you give yourself by letting people know as soon as possible, as soon as is huge. And it takes this monkey off your back and everything.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Something I'm so curious to ask you about. You have had all of these amazing passions. I mean, you studied music, I believe, in undergrad, and then fashion and, corporate life, and then, all of the spiritual teachings and writings and courses. How did you begin to really achieve success in your spiritual work?
Um, well, there, I would say that I really kind of hit a benchmark after 15 years. And
Wow.
I don't expect our listeners to take that long. Partially it's because the audience is growing. More and more people are um, tuning in to the fact that they can take control of their reality, that they can create matrices that will help them find what they really want. And, that's one of the things that I'm really strongly advise people about manifestation. If you're not happy where you're at, you don't focus on that. You focus on what you do like about where you're at. So let's say you have a job, but the owner is a real difficult person to work with, then you focus on the fact that they've been paying you all along. You focus on the fact that you could take vacation. You focus on the fact that you have medical benefits, whatever it is that you can glean as a benefit. And you focus on those things. And then you focus on what you would like. And that might be a job where everyone loves me and treats me well and, doesn't freak out when I make a mistake. And so part of the things that I did is I would go to the gym every morning and I had a little clipboard. And on the clipboard were all these positive statements. So I'm on the stair step machine or one of those, elliptical things. I would be reading from my clipboard and saying these phrases to myself softly. I work with people who love what I have to offer. I get paid well for the job I'm in. My coworkers and I get along well, like that. And, and a special emphasis on the things that weren't working where I was at. Now, what's interesting is, I'll say a couple of things about myself, and then I want to go to a separate story that's kind of a segue. I am a change maker, and so in all my corporate jobs, I don't know about all of them, but a good number of them, I was fired, and that's really scary to say because you don't want to say you've been fired. Nobody wants to say I was fired, and but I was never fired for not performing my job. I was fired because I stood up to people. And I said, not on my watch, and so, things would happen. Um, I fired someone and apparently she was the darling and she went running to the board and, gave some stories and I'm consulting with the attorney and the attorney says, do not tell the board what happened. If you do, it'll be all over town and then she'll have a cause to sue. So I didn't. And even he wouldn't tell the board. So you know what happened to me. I was expendable.
Oof. Yeah.
Now, the side story I want to say is everybody has a good reason why they cannot do what they really want to do. So I'll start by saying, when I was working in corporate, I wanted to be self-employed, but I was afraid. I was afraid because I wouldn't have medical insurance, I wouldn't have paid vacation, I wouldn't have a steady income. Okay, so I wrote down all my fears on a list, on a big piece of paper, and wrote them all out. And then what I did was I waited a day, because you can clear out all this stuff and discover there's more crap behind it that you're afraid of, that you weren't even aware of until you clear out the stuff that you're really worried about. Okay, so everything's down a list. Let's say there's 30 things on that list. Then I wrote the antidote. Now, I did this with a client, and I ended up making a guided meditation out of it. And it's called Make Your Year a Good One. And the net result is it's full of positive statements based upon the belief that this person was holding, but they happen to be very common beliefs. I won't have enough money. I won't have enough creativity. I'm afraid that I'll fail. You know, all these typical things, especially when you're in you're just getting into the workforce, and maybe you know you're good, but then half the time you doubt that you're good at what you do.
Mm.
So this is a wonderful guided meditation, and it's on my app called Illuminate. So the app itself is free, and it comes with 6 guided meditations. One of them is a big award winner called Golden Bowl Meditation,
Mm.
and it activates the energy around the pineal. And I have pages of endorsements from people on the reactions and the physical sensations they get after doing that meditation. And if it's done on a regular basis, it would definitely turn on your connection. And my irreverent name for this meditation is, it's the satellite dish to call home.
Mm. Love
And that's because it activates the sinus cavities and people can feel it. So going back to the storyline, if you're one of those people that you really want to, do or be in a different place than where you're currently at, take time to write out all your fears. Why I can't be. So for example, on my antidote list for myself, the antidote was I won't have health insurance. My antidote was, well, of course you can get health insurance. You just have to buy it yourself. It's you can still get it. It's not like you're not insurable. And when I won't have paid vacations, the antidote was, no, but you'll be able to take time off whenever you want. You don't have to get permission to go somewhere. So each of these antidotes then became part of my new inner awareness, new inner mantra. And
Mm.
those are the things that helped me to grow out of my fears and my worries that I would fail or not achieve what I wanted to achieve. And then as far as a mom, this is really important. A mantra that anybody who is a parent can say is, I am asking for the mantle of the Divine Mother to overshadow me this day. You need to say it every day, but can you now, a mantle in this case is like a stole or a scarf that you would wear around your neck, kind of like what a priest might wear. And you're asking for that mantle of the Divine Mother to overshadow you. Well, let me show you. This is one of my paintings of the Divine Mother. Let's see if I can get this to do what I want it to do. I'm gonna just get up and move the camera. It'll be faster. But I want everyone to see it because it's so stunning.
Mm. Wow.
So,
That's beautiful.
thank you. So, the Divine Mother can be anything to people. It could be Kuan Yin, it could be Tara, it could be Mother Mary, it could be Mary Magdalene, it doesn't matter. Whoever you are working with, and you get to ask for that. And if you were a single parent, you might name both parents. I'm the Divine Mother and the Divine Father to each of my children. And that really helps you, because what happens is when you claim that you're the divine parent and you're asking for the mantle, I'm asking for the mantle of the divine parent to overshadow me. Then when you are struggling with your child's behavior, you don't go into the stuff that maybe your parents did. They might have yelled at
Mhm.
you, might have spanked you, those kinds of things. Um, I've been asked by many people to write a book on how I raised my sons, because they, every time I share what I did, people are just like, oh my goodness, that's so amazing. Um, but first of all, if this is your first time as a mom, and you are choosing to breastfeed, you don't have to worry about spoiling your child till age 2. You know, just let the baby have what the baby wants. Initially, they don't know that you're separate if you're
Mhm.
nursing, so that part's really nice. Anyway, there were a lot of times that I didn't know what to do, but I used my higher self connection. And this is something that I teach people, and it is a very left brain exercise. So you learn in a very logical, systematic way to connect with your higher self, and it'll give you 100% accuracy.
Yeah. That's amazing. And for listeners out there who may be thinking, well, I don't have a strong intuitive connection, or I don't feel or sense my higher self, I would love to hear how we can really develop and strengthen that. And also, what are some practical ways that we can use and call upon that connection?
Well, I do highly recommend this protocol. And this protocol does require a 6 weeks commitment to learn it. But once you learn it, and once you do the work, you will be amazed. I mean, today I cook with it, I follow directions with it, I ask about important decisions that I need to make. And all my students say the same thing, that they rely on it extensively. So the protocol is very simple, very straightforward. First, we do a meditation, and I can walk you through it. I don't know how we're doing time wise, but if we have like a 10-minute window, we can do that. And then the protocol has 3 steps, and you follow those steps for 6 weeks, and you will have accuracy. It's astounding, but it's true. And the reason it works is pretty straightforward also. Essentially, we all have an ego that wants to solve our problems for us. So we use our ego to make decisions. We rationalize, let's say we want to buy a car, and we do the research, we talk to our friends. Ultimately, we're making a decision at the very basic personality level. And what I tell people, when you're working with your higher self, what you do is the same thing. You go through that process, and then you ask your higher self at the end. So you're asking your higher self the very last question, and then that's it. There's no difference. There's no other choice. But because you've practiced for 6 weeks, you have a history. You know, most people, especially listeners to your podcast, might have good intuition. They might follow their guidance most of the time. But here's why you need the protocol, because if you don't follow your guidance 100% of the time, you don't trust it.
Mm.
So the only way to trust it is to do the protocol, because the protocol moves you from trust to knowing. And what's the difference between trust and knowing? You trust that it'll show up for our podcast. You know the sun's going to come up tomorrow. You
Mm.
see?
Mhm.
And so the reason that they don't follow their higher self 100% of the time is because they trust it, but they don't know that their higher self is always right. You
Yes.
see? And our personality wants to second guess it. This is why we do all the personality stuff first. The other reason is when we have a good history of following our higher self for 6 weeks, and we do this on unimportant stuff. So the three rules of the protocol are very simple. Ask only unimportant questions 30 to 40, 50 times a day. And number 2, always follow through. And number 3, put away all your divination devices. No pendulum, no muscle testing, none of it. If you're a therapist of some sort and you use muscle testing for your clients, go right ahead, but don't use it on yourself for 6 weeks. Now, of course, some people will say, well, can I go back to that after the 6 weeks? And the answer is yeah, but you won't want to, because your higher self is so much more accurate. And why do I say don't use your pendulum? 2 reasons. Number 1, you're tempted to double check, and we don't
Mhm.
want to do that. And number 2, I can influence your pendulum. I had a friend whose daughter was very precocious, and we were at dinner one day, and the daughter was showing off this new pendulum that she had just gotten, and she was so excited about how she was getting answers and stuff. And I looked at her and I said, so how's it going? And she says, here, I'll show you. And she couldn't get it to cooperate. She said, I don't know what's going on. I've never had this problem before. And I said, well, that's because I'm influencing it. And she was shocked. She said, why would you do that? And I said, because I want you to know your higher self can't be influenced. I
Mhm.
can't interfere with you and your higher self, but I can interfere with your pendulum. And so can anybody else.
Yeah.
So the benefit is recognizing. Now, the pendulum is great for vitamins, doctor appointments, what therapies to use, what medical procedures to have, because it's reading your immediate field. But when you have an important question about an event you want to go to, or a new job you want to take, or a product you want to buy, your higher self is much better authority than your immediate field, because it can read the entire field in all directions. And I want to tell a story about that, and then I will teach you the protocol if you'd like.
Please.
I was the director of development, and I had a responsibility to get a particular story into the newspaper. And I had been calling the reporter that I knew I would have to talk to get my story, and it was his category. And I must have called his office, 3 or 4 times with no luck. He was never there. And so I kind of set it aside. And now it's 5 minutes till 5. And my higher self came in. This is after my 6 weeks of practice, mind you. My higher self said, call the reporter. And I said, no, I don't want to call him. It's 5 till 5. I want to go home. I'm tired. I'm hungry. Call the reporter. No, the kids are waiting for me to make dinner, blah, blah, blah. Call the reporter. So one of the things is, after you develop this skill, your higher self can come in and tell you stuff before you ask, stuff you need to know. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, it's okay to argue with your higher self, but if your higher self insists, gives you that information a third time, like in my case, then you acquiesce. So I get on the phone, I call the guy, and the first words out of his mouth were, Maureen, how could you possibly know that I would be here at this time? I'm never here at this time. And all I could do was do what you did. I laughed. I didn't exactly want to say, well, my higher self told me you'd be here. So that's not the best part of the story. The best part of the story is my story made the front page of the state's largest newspaper. Front page.
It's amazing.
And again, it's because when you're in alignment, you get to take all the good turnoffs, so to speak. So let's talk about the protocol. We've given you the 3 rules or the 3 steps. The simple thing we do is we do a quick meditation, and I'm going to ask you a few questions, and then we're going to come out of it and you're going to write down the answers you got. So if you're listening or watching, put your pen or pencil down for just a few minutes. You won't need it. And have your feet flat on the floor, hands uncrossed. You can have them, you can do this or this, but don't do this, don't do anything like that. And just relax for a moment and close your eyes. Now think of a pet or an infant that you've held in your arms. And hear yourself say to this little one, I love you. And say it like you mean it. Say it multiple times. And now you may even feel your heart energy expand. And so as you do that, send a beam of love and light up your pranic tube, past your throat chakra, activating it, past your third eye, activating it, crown chakra, activating it, and then continuing upward all the way up to your eighth chakra, where the portal to your higher self exists. And we now invite the higher self to join us in our heart. And now, with that connection in place, say to your higher self something along the lines like this: I'm ready and willing to learn how to connect with my higher self. And I'd like to get my symbols or signals for yes, no, and neutral. So higher self, give me my symbol or signal for yes. And this symbol or signal could be a feeling, like a sensation in your body, a tingle in your ear, itchy foot, flip-flops in your stomach. It could be a color in your mind's eye or a shape in your mind's eye. It could even be a sound or even a taste in your mouth. So higher self, give me my signal for yes. And let the signal come in a second time. For some of you, it will be very faint, but it's still there. Don't deny it. Don't pretend it's not there. And don't say I didn't get anything. Now, we give thanks to the higher self, and we do this for the energy of no. What does no look like, feel like, sound like, taste like? Some people even get the word no. So if you get the word for no or yes, that's your symbol or signal. Asking again, higher self, give me my symbol or signal for no. Higher self, give me my symbol or signal for neutral. Many people feel neutral as a big emptiness in the center of their body. It could be awareness of the pranic tube from like the throat to the perineum. It could feel like an empty tube. You're aware of energy there, but it feels empty. Higher self, show me again my symbol or signal for neutral. Thank you. So now open your eyes and write down what you got. So everyone who's watching and listening, take a moment, and Emily, you should do the same. Take a moment and write it down. And if there's symbols that you've gotten before, that's fine, but still write it down. I've even had people accidentally reverse it and think that the no symbol and the yes symbol were the opposite of what they got. Some people get a feeling for what their higher self might look like. Some people don't. Some people just get a sensation of light or just love. So you don't want to judge yourself, just whatever you get is what you got. And there's a very small percentage of people who don't get anything. And those people are super cerebral. And there is a workaround for that. I have it available for someone. So if you try it a couple of times, do it at least twice, this exercise, before you send us a text or an email rather, asking for the link to the workaround.
Mhm. And Maureen, is this available on your app and on your website, the protocol?
It is, yeah. It's the higher self protocol is listed on the wisdom section of the app,
Okay.
and it's step by step. So once you get your symbols or signals, then you start to play and you ask about things you don't care about. So if you're really thinking about Chinese, but you only want to go to a certain Chinese restaurant, and you ask your higher self, is it my highest best good to go to a Chinese restaurant? Yes. Is it my highest and best good to go to this Chinese restaurant for dinner tonight? No. Is there another Chinese restaurant I could go to? Yes. And then you would go one by one, higher self. And the benefit is always a big surprise. So for example, you might discover that you walk into the restaurant and there's somebody there that you've been trying to find. You ask what route to take to get home from your shopping or work, and you get told a different route than you normally take. And then you discover there was a big car accident and traffic was tied up for hours on your regular route.
Yeah.
So cool stuff like that starts to happen. And you begin to recognize, oh, wow, my higher self is really on it. Now, there are some people that don't follow the rules very well. And I'm laughing at myself because I have met some of those people and they shock me and they make me laugh. But I'll give you an example. So there's 3 rules. We talked about them at the beginning. 30 or 40 questions a day, only yes, no questions about stuff you don't care about. That's rule number 1. Rule number 2, always follow through. That means if you're hankering for a chocolate chip cookie and you're in the grocery store and you've got the cookie in your hand and you decide, okay, higher self, is my highest best good to buy this cookie? No, you put it back. You don't say to yourself, well, maybe tomorrow it'll be okay and I'll just pick it up anyway. No, you asked if I should buy it, and that's that.
Mhm.
Okay. And the other thing is you ask the last question. So the last question might be, higher self, is it my highest and best good to have this cookie after dinner tonight? No. Higher self, is it in my highest and best good to buy the cookie for a future date? Yes. See what I mean? But you have to be willing to be aware of what you're asking and move forward. So here we have this very devoted woman in a class in China, and she got her higher self signals right away, got that, caught on right away. And that morning, we all are in the hotel. So at that morning, she's at the buffet line and she asks her higher self if she should have meat. So she stands up and says, I want to know why my higher self lied to me this morning. And so I said, well, what did you ask? And she said, well, I'm a vegan. And I asked my higher self if I should have meat this morning at breakfast. And my higher self said yes. So there's 2 things there's only 3 rules and she broke 2 of them. Number 1, she asked something that she wasn't willing to do.
Right.
And number 2, she didn't follow through after she asked.
It's very specific. I mean, it's like Olympic training for your connection with your higher self, I really feel. It's like a muscle. And I think the repetition and then honoring what you receive is so, so powerful. So I love this practice, Maureen. I'm so grateful that you guided us through. And it's something that I think listeners can return to over and over again, as well as, visiting your website, your app, which we will absolutely link to in the show notes. I want to ask you one final question as we close for today. What advice would you have for your younger self?
Well, because I went for so many years, barely making it, barely hanging on, I often ask myself at the time, how do I know if I'm supposed to give up? And so the advice I'd give to my younger self is always ask, I need a sign to keep going. I need a sign. Show me a sign. And one of the best ways to get a sign is to say, Dear God, show me how much I am loved.
Mm,
Very powerful,
yes.
very effective.
I love that. And I have loved this conversation. I want to have you back on the show sometime because I think we got through half of my questions. So lots more to talk about, but what a wealth of wisdom. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
And if I may, I'd like to give a shout out for a big event I'm doing in Denver at Gaia. They have an event every year called Gaia Sphere, where they invite guests and you can come live and be with speakers. And I'm one of the speakers. And if you decide you're going to come, sign up and use my name, Maureen, to get a discount code. I think it's like $99 off. And even if you can't come, they're going to stream it live. And so again, in order to sign up, you need a code to get a little discount. So please use my name, Maureen,
And
as a,
yeah, and what's the date of that?
I think it's March 15, maybe 16 and 17. March
Okay,
16 and 17. Yeah.
beautiful. And it's your full name, Maureen
Just
St.
Maureen, just
Maureen.
Maureen.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, that'll do. That'll do. And I'm grateful for your participation and I'm so grateful for everyone listening.